His primary psychological comfort was centered around a certain famous mouse with round ears. Now, I can't even look at that cartoon. I'd surrender everything I own just to have him back in my sight, without a second thought. Look at that image right there. That's the specific piece of my soul that's missing, Your Honor. I'm Kevin, and this is a testimony that defies easy explanation. I'm grateful for your attention throughout this briefing, because the intelligence shared today could be the critical factor in a split-second decision that prevents a child's death. Before we proceed, one directive. Distribute this file and log your current location in the comments for our records. The wider we cast this net, the higher the probability that someone will recognize these red flags before another tragedy unfolds. Now, let's establish the timeline and return to the point of origin. July 14th, 2016, Montgomery County, Virginia. Stephen Meek officially stepped into the role of a first-time parent. He designated his son as Stephen Dale Meek II. There are no words to describe the gravity of holding your legacy for the first time. The elder, Stephen, was frozen in place, staring down at his child in a state of absolute, profound silence. Miniature fingers, the radiant warmth of a new life, and eyes that couldn't focus but were already tracking his movements. In that singular moment, his objective became clear. This was the most significant assignment he would ever undertake. The younger Stephen was raised in the quiet jurisdiction of Christiansburg, Virginia, a community where anonymity is virtually non-existent. It's the kind of place where neighbors maintain constant surveillance and children remain active outdoors until the sun disappears. He was the exact type of subject who populates your brightest memories, full of kinetic energy and pure, radiant life. His laughter was a spontaneous burst that could alter the atmosphere of a room. People found themselves smiling by sheer reflex. Resistance to his charm was impossible. His primary fixation, however, was a certain iconic cartoon character. That threadbare plush mouse was his constant shadow, from grocery runs to the sleep cycle. His father once conducted a playful test of their bond. Certain attachments are sacred to a child. He also exhibited a keen interest in visual narratives, following a very specific protocol. First, he would systematically analyze every page, his finger cataloging every detail that caught his cognitive attention. Only then would he look up at a nearby adult, as if requesting a formal debriefing on his findings. During oral briefings, he would achieve total physical stillness, exhibiting a level of focus unexpected for a 2-year-old profile. His father maintained a nightly reading ritual. It was a classified, quiet period of simple, unadulterated connection between them. The tactical bond between father and son was absolute. They were an inseparable unit. Morning patrols to the park often stalled at puddles, where Stephen would analyze his reflection with the intensity of a profound investigator. Weekends were spent in joint surveillance of cartoons, with the plush Mickey positioned as an observer to these vital, ordinary moments. These were the small, quiet components that meant everything. Stephen Sr. archived every fragment of evidence. He reviewed the photos nightly, projecting a long-term trajectory for the man his boy would become. Within the family inner circle, he was identified by the alias Lil Bit. His maternal grandfather, a high-priority associate in his life, dedicated every available minute to his grandson's well-being. Stephen II possessed an innate capacity to elevate the morale of everyone in his vicinity simply by his presence. The parental unit was split. Stephen Sr. and Kayla Thomas maintained a legally mandated shared custody arrangement. Consequently, Stephen's time was divided. As long as that system held, the boy existed within a perimeter of perceived safety. He was surrounded by guardians until the protection failed. This investigation is in its early stages, a new endeavor entirely. Your engagement is the fuel that keeps our operation running. If this case resonates with you, if you believe this data is vital, subscribe and log your support on the record. It confirms that this mission is necessary and that these voices deserve to be heard. We have more files pending review, and any one of them could be the piece of intel that changes everything for someone. Sometime in 2018, a man named McKenzie Helman entered Kayla Thomas's life. He was 25 years old. He moved into a residence at 430 Zinc Lane, a nondescript mobile home on a silent street near the precinct. Helman brought his own young son into the mix. From that point, two toddlers were sharing a roof under his watch. From a surveillance perspective, there were no anomalies. No red flags were raised. A young woman in a fresh relationship, a new face on the property. It is a common, unremarkable narrative. Neighbors rarely observed the children outdoors, but in a quiet suburb, that absence of activity drew no suspicion. No domestic disputes, no shouting, no police dispatch. A neighbor behind the house later claimed he never knew a child lived there. On paper, the legal custody arrangement between Kayla and Stephen Sr. remained the standing order. In reality, the situation was drifting. Little Stephen's visits to his biological father were becoming increasingly infrequent. He was losing time to a man he barely knew. Stephen Sr. would check in, only to receive hollow, routine assurances. But a father's intuition is a powerful diagnostic tool. Something deep in his gut refused to settle. There is a specific brand of malice that operates in total silence, leaving no visible evidence for the public to find. It bypasses the standard tripwires of the system, never triggering a single forensic alarm. This darkness thrives behind closed doors, in blind spots where social services never reach without a direct whistleblower. Christiansburg police later confirmed a clean slate for Helman and Thomas. No priors, no noise complaints, no referrals, nothing on record. To the bureaucracy, this family was a ghost, invisible and completely off the grid. Meanwhile, the boy was fading from view. The child, his father knew as a whirlwind of curiosity, was retreating. He was becoming hushed and uncharacteristically guarded. The light in his eyes was slowly being extinguished. The transformation was a slow bleed, so subtle that even his loved ones couldn't pinpoint the exact moment of onset. The beginning of the end. His father sensed the rot early. He missed the simple rhythm of their shared weekends together, missing the way they'd sit on the floor and play, the simple proximity of father and son. He missed the chatter. The boy who once sprinted toward him at the door had been replaced by someone different. The child was constantly tense, perpetually bracing for impact. His father had no idea what was happening inside that house. What investigators eventually uncovered there would leave even seasoned law enforcement officers struggling for words. It began as a routine day. Kayla Thomas clocked in for her shift at the Deli Mart over on Roanoke Street. McKenzie Helman stayed behind with two toddlers, Stephen and his own 2-year-old son. Around 8:35 that evening, the couple was trading texts. She inquired about the status of the house. She mentioned a detail no one took seriously, that Stephen had been acting erratic and seemed off lately. Helman sent a brief reply. At 9:05, he called her. 8 minutes later, at 9:13, he dialed 911. Officer Aaron Lusk was the first through the door. He found Helman seated on the living room floor. Beside him lay Stephen, motionless on the ground. Medics arrived within minutes, performing life-saving measures for 25 grueling minutes before the boy was stable enough to move. Helman's cover story. The boys were playing in the bedroom. He heard a thud and found Stephen on the floor. He claimed a fall from the bed. Officers measured that bed on the spot. It was only 13 inches high, barely off the ground. Stephen was rushed to Lewis Gale Montgomery before being medevaced to Carilion Roanoke Memorial Hospital. The trauma team fought hard, but 2 days later, on January 13, 2019, at 7:40 in the evening, Stephen Dale Meek II was gone. He was 2.5 years old. His father took the call and went cold. This was the son he read to every single night. The child whose every mundane moment he had captured on film. The son he planned to protect for a lifetime. Gone. a finality that no amount of justice could ever reverse. Detectives in Christiansburg began building the case that same night, long before the final outcome was certain. Helman's narrative about the bed didn't just fail, it disintegrated under the weight of the evidence. Dr. Amy Tharp, the medical examiner, testified with clinical precision. A 13-inch tumble from a bed is fundamentally inconsistent with the trauma Stevens sustained. She remarked that if a fall of that height were truly lethal, the human race would never survive past infancy. When the task force mirrored the devices belonging to Helman and Kayla Thomas, the digital footprint they uncovered paralyzed even the most seasoned detectives. Analyzing the archived chats and raw video files, a sickening mosaic of the reality inside that home began to take shape. This evidence pointed towards something far more calculated and sinister than mere negligence or momentary cruelty. The investigation revealed that from the onset, Helman had engineered a system of absolute psychological and physical dominion over the household. He systematically dismantled Kayla's psyche, exerting a level of control that, by her own admission on the stand, left her shattered. She testified to existing in a state of terminal terror, fearing for her life, her pregnancy, and for young Stevens' safety. Under that crushing psychological weight, she crossed a moral Rubicon, committing an act the court later categorized as a first-degree felony. 3 days prior to Stevens' death on January 8th, Helman used private threads to coerce Kayla into an unforgivable betrayal of her son. The forensic extraction from her smartphone provided the undeniable digital smoking gun the prosecution required. During that specific exchange, Helman was positioned at the opposite end of the same manufactured home. Steven was betrayed by the only 2 anchors he had. By the time Kayla left for work on January 11th, the fuse was lit. With Helman left alone in that residence, the trajectory toward the inevitable conclusion was already set in stone. Helman was taken into custody on January 13th for multiple felonies, followed by Kayla's arrest on the 16th. Both defendants were held without bond. At the time of her booking, Kayla was carrying Helman's child. Circulate this briefing among your networks. Put it in front of anyone who understands that child safety is a collective responsibility. Increasing the visibility of this case improves the odds of a bystander identifying these behavioral red flags before a life is lost. The wheels of justice turned slowly, dragging the legal process out for nearly 2 years. For 730 days, Stevens' father waited for a courtroom to acknowledge his loss. In March 2021, the jury faced Helman. The initial proceedings focused squarely on the depravity documented within the files extracted from his personal devices. It took the jury only 30 minutes to return a unanimous guilty verdict, recommending 2 consecutive life sentences. On July 26, 2021, Helman appeared in court to enter a plea of guilty for the remaining indictments. He sat before the bench, offering nothing but hollow, monosyllabic responses to the magistrate's direct inquiries. By August, the hammer fell. 2 life terms plus 90 additional years. That prison gate is locked forever. Then the spotlight shifted to Kayla Thomas. Her defense counsel never denied the physical reality of her actions. They argued she was a victim of psychological warfare, coerced into compliance by a deep fear for her unborn infant's safety. After reviewing the evidence for exactly 60 minutes, the jury returned 4 counts of guilty across the board. She spoke to the court of a soul-crushing regret regarding the tragedy that had unfolded. She claimed she'd trade everything to see her son again. The jury's final recommendation: 2 life sentences plus 10 years. On September 23, 2021, the sentence was officially etched into the permanent record. Prior to the sentencing, the judge remarked that this file was among the most harrowing of his entire judicial career. Stevens' family offered their impact statements. Melinda Chrisley, his grandmother, spoke of the incomprehensible nature of such a betrayal. His grandfather, the man Steven affectionately called Pawpaw, stood to deliver a final, heartbreaking testimony. He confessed that his grandson occupies his thoughts every hour, staring at a photograph that serves as a painful reminder of what's gone. Addressing the bench with a heavy heart, he spoke directly to the gravity of the legal conclusion. He declared today as the day of reckoning and ultimate justice for his little boy, Stephen. As Stephen Sr. left the courthouse, he realized that while justice was documented, a verdict cannot fill a hollow heart. The legal requirements were satisfied, but his son's chair at the dinner table would remain empty forever. Most men would have retreated into the shadows of their grief, but Stephen Sr. chose a different path. He remained a vocal advocate, carrying the weight of both his mourning and his love into the public square. He didn't just speak of a victim, he spoke of a boy with a soul, a personality, and a future stolen. He described a remarkable little human who, in less than 3 years, left an indelible mark on everyone he met. His memory, fueled by a life that should have lasted decades, became the primary catalyst for systemic legal change. Stephen's tragedy forced the state of Virginia to fundamentally re-examine its approach to shared custody litigation. We've overhauled how we vet a child's safety once a new adult enters their domestic perimeter. New operational directives mandate seamless intelligence sharing between field agents and social welfare departments. We are enforcing heightened liability for threats that remain invisible beneath a veneer of normalcy. These reforms won't recover our lost subject, but they ensure his file never stays closed. Our updated tactics are already shielding others, which is the only measurable form of restitution. Stephen Dale Meek II arrived on July 14, 2016, obsessed with Mickey Mouse and picture books. Records show he cherished dawn excursions and evening narratives, exhibiting a rare kindness toward strangers. He was profiled for a full life, one that should have reached every natural milestone: education, social bonds, and thousands of unremarkable, peaceful mornings were his rightful biological trajectory. That timeline was severed. Every civilian maintains a critical role in this broader surveillance network. When a subject retreats or exhibits dread toward their residence, do not dismiss it as a phase. These are distress beacons. As neighbors or clinicians, you are the first line of detection. If your intuition detects an anomaly, notify the Child Help National Hotline or report to local command. Disregard the fear of being wrong. The embarrassment of a false report is something you can survive. The psychological burden of silence is far heavier. We will ensure the meek boy remains in memory. A child who never abandoned his Mickey Mouse toy and analyzed books with profound, quiet gravity. I appreciate you staying for this debrief. Your attention to these details is vital. This data is cold and difficult, which is exactly why it requires our absolute focus. Ensure you are receiving our intelligence updates and archive this report for future tactical reference. Examine our other case files, as more narratives still require a public accounting and justice. Maintain your own operational health while remaining vigilant over the vulnerable in your sector. If you harbor the illusion that every childhood is a sanctuary, stop. This isn't a script from a Hollywood writer's room. This isn't a hollow true crime dramatization. This is the cold, unfiltered reality of the human condition. A flesh and blood child, and a father haunted by a psychological void that no amount of time can ever bridge. The details of this case will seize you immediately, pulling you into a narrative that ends in total emotional devastation. It's the profile of a brief, luminous life extinguished while the very institutions designed to protect him remain tragically unaware of the threat.